to listen about DDoS and web application security and aggressive approach to mitigating and handling attacks. A couple things right off the bat that I'd like to discuss. And one, this webinar is not intended to solve or prevent DOS attacks or web application security attacks. It's more of information so that you can take back to your management or to your constituents to make an informed decision as to how to mitigate these attacks. We're going to discuss at a very high level some of the past ways that attacks were handled and created and how they're going today. We're gonna kind of look at some of those constructs, if you will, and then we're going to kind of discuss on how we mitigate and what we're looking at to mitigating these attacks. So our agenda includes DDoS attacks then and now, application server security, why bother, is the firewall and IDP enough, what about the cloud, turning the tables on evil, and intelligent decision making by committee. So DOS attacks. I think everybody pretty much knows what a DOS attack is, and if you don't, it stands for Distributed Denial of Service Attack. It's basically an attack that's originated by a single individual or group of individuals directed at a primary host. So businesses and enterprises across the globe, you know, whether they're public-facing or internal-facing, if they're govs, educational facilities encounter these types of issues on a day-to-day basis, including financials. They reside on the internet. They have a presence on the internet. These organizations do, and the unfortunate reality is that the internet now is more open than it's ever been, you know, in the past 20 years. And of course, along with that comes opportunities, both good and bad. And the bad opportunity, obviously, is those hackers, the nefarious folk, ne'er-do-wells, etc. All those guys that you consider rapscallions in the above. They have one mind, one purpose, and one means, and that's to get after whatever you have, both for pleasure and in most cases today for opportunity and financial gain. So we talk about DOS attacks, and back then, you know, back in the early 90s and late 80s, certainly when DOS attacks were first starting to be thought about as a way to make a name for yourself and prove to the community outside of building a virus, and to, you know, basically prove your coding muscle, if you will. So attacks were mostly from a single host to another single host, and it was just a constant barrage of ICMP packets or ping packets, if you will, basically sending syntax to a host, be it a PC or firewall, router, etc. And it was meant to break or compromise the connection. And basically the sole purpose at that point, back then, was to just make a name for yourself. It was mostly driven by accolades and notoriety, especially if you're trying to get a job and trying to prove your worth within the security community, showing that you're able to hack. You know, hence the birth and the creation of the white hat instead of the black hat. Black hat obviously does things for negative purposes, and the white hat does things for research and tries to reverse engineer attacks to figure out ways to defend against them. The unfortunate reality is that the lines can be typically blurred, and sometimes we don't know what's actually happening. So we look at the DOS attacks then today. That was then. Today we look at them as distributed denial of service attacks. The attackers are coordinated, distributed, and they come from all points, north, south, east, and west. Typically, they're going after an entity, but it's usually to disguise. How I correlate it is basically the guy who puts a glove over his hand to break in into the jewelry store to grab the diamond. So basically, we're disguising our fingerprints by sending a DDoS attack and then using that same instrument to gather information from the end user, being whether it's an enterprise or an organization or a government institution. Again, today they're driven by organized crime and governments, and in some cases they are very, very well funded. So these attacks can be difficult to stop. Current defenses included expanding, contracting internet access, geotagging traffic, creating permissible traffic honeypots, and more. That requires time. Obviously, time is of the essence, especially when an attack is occurring on a financial institution or occurring to an organization that requires that its internet presence be up and available 24/7. Given that there's a lot of different new introductions, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, and that's called the cloud. Obviously, that's an additional threat vector that gets exploited. And we'll talk a little bit more about cloud computing and some of the things to look for down the road here. These organizations are types of the attacks, banks and other organizations that are seeing today. Hackers control clusters of computers. So basically the scary bit of it is that not only are they attacking you, but now they are infiltrating you, and they're planting bots into machines, basically creating zombie attackers that at any given time, with any prescribed time, they can go ahead and attack you from a remote location, and without the hacker even having to lift a finger. It's all been pre-programmed, and unfortunately, these tools to which to create all these attacks are readily available on Google, Yahoo. You can do a search. You can do any one of those search and find low ion, what they call the low ion cannon blaster. It's a spoof or a spin-off of a Star Wars theme, the blaster that was in The Empire Strikes Back. I say that because they typically name their tools something ridiculous like that, but it's a highly effective and highly dangerous tool, and anyone can grab them. You can go ahead and check it out online and see if you could find it, probably download it and attack somebody if you wanted to. However, I don't recommend doing so. I mean, not cool. So we talk about DDoS again, and we're talking about, again, the philosophy behind DDoS and what the purpose is of it today. Now, everyone has their own philosophies and ideas of why these things are occurring, but for the most part, obviously, financial gain seems to be one of the best reasons for it. But there is an idea circulating throughout the security and internet community, and that is, what if the hackers could initiate a DDoS attack from inside an organization? What if the hackers own the ISP? It's basically relative to what if the inmates ran the asylum. This is a very scary thought. It is a very real thought, because it is going to happen. It's not a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. It's just a matter of when. And what can we do to protect ourselves? What can we do to prevent these attacks from happening? I think it's hard to tell, given that everything is a manual process today. We are always in reactionary mode, even with the best firewalls and IDPs out there, and sensors, etc. We don't always do a good job of covering up all of our holes, and that's just the reality of doing more with less. We have more of that is required out of IT, and there are less people to do it with. And unfortunately, security always gets a first eye because it's not easy to implement. It's costly, and the other thing is that if it doesn't really work in the offshoot, it doesn't get adopted right away. Customers and constituents, user bases will scream and cry and holler, my network is slow, I can't get to my applications, what can you do, what did you change, etc. All that gets bubbled up to upper management. Next thing you know, upper management is starting to torpedo all of these initiatives, or saying, you know what, let's start putting holes into these security mechanisms. At the end of the day, we've just pervasively made everything worse because we're trying to appease everyone. Security very much is a stance. It is very much a posture. It is very much a way of life. Very much aching to, I live to eat, I don't live to eat. So if you adopt the whole we live to eat, of course you're going to do everything possible to just do what's right or what's acceptable for the general masses. If you go after the whole I'm eating to live mantra, in other words, I'm engaging in a philosophy, a lifestyle, a business style, a business stance, then I think it'll be much easier to digest. It's an overall culture change, certainly, It also is a dichotomy change and paradigm shift for many organizations for public-facing infrastructures. So now we go to the application server side. So why does it matter that I'm talking about DDoS and then we're talking about application server security? Well, the unfortunate reality again is that people are going after money. They're going after information to create and build money. You know, gather and store credit card information, gather and store personal information, get as much information on anybody, and you can pretty much create your own financial wealth and business model. And that's what that's what organized crime has done. Governments don't typically go after that. They go after, how do I destroy somebody? How do I bury them? How do I get as much information so that I can hurt them? And you can't get that information if you're being readily detected. So the best method to go about getting undetected is to throw up a smoke screen. So again, sort of like that guy with the glove, you know, he's putting on to hide his fingerprints, and then he's able to snatch the diamond, or like a ninja throwing one of those smoke bombs and then sneaking away. Unfortunately, this is not TV, or nor is it, a movie. It is very much reality. So they're very much tied at the hip, the application server security and the DDoS security. So reasons for web and application security: obviously compliance, your PCI, HIPAA, GLBA, etc. Business retention. You want to make sure you keep your customers happy and coming back, and make sure that you have a secure environment so that they feel secure and they're willing to give you your business, especially your credit card, their credit card, and their personal information. Probably stuff you haven't already heard, but again, things that need to be talked about. It's like that thought process. You know, burying your head in the sand, you think everything's going to go away. Everyone's afraid to talk about it because, someone may or may not agree with the philosophies of security. Then you have public demand. Of course, people want more. They want more of your services. They want more of that intrinsic value that you bring to your user base. However, if you're compromised, they're not really going to want to visit your website. If you're an insurance company, or if you're a physician's office, people are not really going to want to share their information with you, nor probably do business, because they know that their data is not safe. Again, ties back to business retention. Those two guys in the middle are also tightly close-knit. And then you have business continuity. Obviously, we want to keep the business running. We want the lights to keep rolling. We want everything to be happy. You want your servers to keep humming. Reality is that business continuity goes out the window and you get compromised, and all of a sudden your business comes to a halt. The thousands, the hundreds of thousands, the millions, depending on the size of your organization, of losses that in revenue and lost customer and future growth, it can be exponential. Again, it's reality. This is not something from sci-fi, the sci-fi TV channel. This is very much in line with what's happening today. We hear about it each and every day. Organizations such as Sony, such as Chase, and BOA, etc. Those are organizations that have been in the news, that have been subjects of DDoS attacks, compromises and data breaches, etc. I wish there was more that we could have done way back when, but obviously the internet was born for public and open consumption in its form today. Obviously back then its use was very much intended to be different when it was first created. So why are we going after application security, and kind of give you a high level overview of what transpired back in the day. So back in the 70s, we had this guy create the idea of phreaking. So basically, it's a morphed attack on an application. Back then, applications were entirely different. They were more analog than they are digital. Obviously, we had punch cards. If you were able to confuse the machine, however, with your punch card, you were pretty much able to confuse everybody and overflow its buffer, and then boom, it's going to spit out whatever you want because it doesn't have the wherewithal to keep it from coming out. Same thing with Brain and Morris back in the 80s. Obviously we have cool names in the 80s. In the 90s we had phishing. That was the beginning of the social engineering aspect, people just falling asleep at the wheel, opening up a blind email and saying, oh, I got an email from a bank I've never heard from, so I'm going to open it up and see what it's got. So basically it's payload in the inside, obviously had either a Trojan or some type of bot built into it, some type of virus. You're opening it, boom, you're toast. You're compromised, and there you go. In the 2000s, we took that a step further from phishing. We took everyone's naivety and pushed the envelope, and we introduced worms. So now, not only are worms living within emails and information that's being sent to you, but now they're living in websites. Sites are being embedded, with their codes, they're cross-scripting, their Java, etc. Everything that runs today, whether it be Flash, Java, ActiveX, they all say they're safe. They all say that they're, if you update, and that's the key word, if you update, you'll be fine. The reality is no one really updates and no one really keeps up to date day one. No one's sitting there watching their PC or watching the trades waiting for that update to come out. Now, obviously, Microsoft has its Update Tuesdays, still happening, and you know when to apply patches, but that doesn't always happen either. I mean, let's be real. Sometimes these patches, they can be quite cumbersome and even cause more problems than they are intended to solve. So we avoid them altogether. Now you get some Windows XP machines, bucket of them, some of the old Windows Vista machines, and they're just lingering out there. No one's taking care of them, but they are still being used. Why? Because they are a valued asset, and you don't have to buy something new. That's typically where the low-hanging fruit resides, and that's because those devices aren't always readily accessible for update. They're either sitting in some corner. There's a machine that someone forgot about, and it's probably not on some update schedule because everybody's moved on, and support for those machines is waning. Why does this happen? Now, when I say why does this happen, I'm talking more on the application level now. So building an application requires time, it requires money, it requires coders. So we look at that. We look at that. It's like anything else when you build a home. It requires money, it requires time, and it requires builders. But we take our time with our houses. Obviously, if not, we don't. It's not up to code. We can't move in. You can't buy it, etc. The truth can't be said about coding a program. Anybody can build a program. You can buy a book, to start creating those programs, and in a few short years, you're a coder. The question becomes is how good of a coder? Now, because of the influx of information that needs to be had, people are hiring coders at a relatively fast clip, especially with big data today. Everyone's looking at how to do Hadoop and all these different new constructs for sharing and producing viable data that means something to a business. So you're hiring coders. Well, the unfortunate reality too there is that not everyone is up to snuff. So we end up with sloppy coding. We end up with people who think their stuff doesn't stink. So you end up with people who think their code is invincible. You have people with lack of knowledge or no security oversight. And faster and fastest to market wins that prize, account. So you're creating, quick design. Now, that's not everybody. It's just those unfortunate few organizations that happen to engage in this type of activity or are forced to because of budgetary constraints. This leaves them in a very poor position. It's the other thing to bear in mind when building applications is that once the application is in play and it's been pushed out, for production, it's hard to get at and stop that application from running, because it very well be that life source for your new organization, whether it be a spin-off or whether it be a new augmented service to your user base. It's hard to get at once it's in production. It's also costly to fix. Also, no one wants to be embarrassed by their peers. No one wants to be embarrassed and show everybody, hey, I screwed up. My coding is not all that great, or maybe you're rushing to get the job done, and you end up, not wanting to look ridiculous in the boardroom, so fear of the peer. Again, peer pressure plays a major part in how we interact socially within IT as well, just as if we're in high school and grade school, and we very much value the opinions of our bosses and those who sit next to us. So if we code wrong, or if we program a router wrong, incorrectly, etc., we don't want to be that person. So sometimes we don't raise our hands when things are not necessarily up to code. That all leads to compromised work. Obviously, we know what happens from that point on. There are exploits to be had, there are holes to walk through, and there are doors that can be kicked in, because we're basically securing this large organization with a screen door, and we're about to set sail. And that for many organizations will just torpedo, will submarine the world as they know it and bring down revenues to a screeching halt, because now they have to stop everything for that and try to mitigate a lot of the problems, and then trying to find where the problem is the other thing. Where do you look? Again, fear of the peer. I'm sure the guy's not going to readily raise his hand and say, hey, it was me. No, it doesn't happen. So we take a look at the life cycle. You log into a web browser. You take that data. It takes that data, it renders it to the screen, so the user base, the user's like, hey, this is cool. This is a great website, or I'm trying to buy some, a pair of pants or a shirt, etc. The browsers are taking that data and interpreting, your interface, and then the language is determined and is agreed upon what it's going to show you. It's at that very point where things go bad. If there is a hole, or if there's an exploit to be had, or some type of cross script that can be injected, that's where the code gets placed and put in for the next person to come along, click on that, and then the information gets leaked. It's a very simplistic view. It's a very high-level view, but overall, this is the way it typically works. It exploits client-server gaps that are exploitable. Again, it should be HTTP, not AHTTP. HTTP is stateless. Too many vendors, too many processes. Again, you're intermixing with many different types of code, and it can be overly complex depending on the size of the site, depending on the size of the application or its use case for that matter. And especially if we're going to introduce the application into the cloud. Again, I mentioned cloud earlier, and I'll mention it again. The cloud is nothing more than the internet. It just happens to be that we are placing more and more services and more applications into the internet and leveraging its openness. That has a lot of many benefits to many different organizations, because it's cheaper, it's available on demand, we're using everyone else's bandwidth. It's not like the days of yore when we had specific server rooms and we were just limited to the speeds and feeds that we were tied to. So if we could only afford a T1, that's all the traffic we could take in. Now that's not the case. We don't need that. We have this stuff that's hosted elsewhere, but who's minding the store? So too many to count in the threat vectors. It's hard to detect. The attacker again can inject and throw bots out there, and he doesn't care. It happens. He just continues to reap in the cache, and then we have the user-inflicted damage. Again, I have that cat there because curiosity does kill the cat. If anything, one of the very prime things that you can do to help stymie all of these issues, especially on the web app side, is to instruct your user base. Education is a very powerful tool. I preach about it all the time. Sometimes I give speeches, or I give keynotes at universities, and I talk to the students about being informed and well-informed to make a well-informed decision. It's hard to make a decision when you're flying by the seat of your pants or shooting from the hip because you just barely read an article, or etc. A lot of this data is predicated on stuff that has gone on for over years of research and working with industry experts. So when you do have an opportunity to educate, always take that opportunity, because you'll be a whole better off organization for it. Trust me. So again, the net result of this is bots. You end up you end up with a bunch of botnets, that are created. Now, we just shut down, the government just shut down a huge botnet now, and just so recently. But think about it. A botnet can generate 1 million times the available bandwidth of a business. If it does that, that means it's flooding your environment. It's killing your ability to do business. It takes just 64,000 PCs infected with a virus like Configure to generate 10 gigabits per second of traffic. Again, that's a lot of data. If you only have a 1 meg pipe, what are you going to do? It's going to take you out. It's going to slow things down. Even your firewalls, even if you have a 10 gig firewall, your firewall is not going to really know what to do with that data, and even when it's trying to, it's going to probably melt. Mariposa, the largest known botnet, affected 12 million PCs. This is a very good example. It could have generated a DDoS attack as 31.2 terabytes per second. That's a very frightening thought. If that would have actually executed the way they had intended it, it would have just been a bad day for everybody on the internet, because that is a lot of data flowing through. And depending on who it was targeted at, that would have been a very bad day for them as well. Again, all this information was sourced from AT&T. So are firewalls and IDP enough? Let's talk about security mechanisms. Firewalls are purpose-built appliances. IDPs are purpose-built appliances built to help stave off and prevent access to and from applications, networks, segments, and also for enforcing security. Traditional firewalls, though, can be overwhelmed depending on the size, depending on the circuit that's on the other end. Sometimes they're poorly sized. They're not sized for the appropriate level of bandwidth. They're limited to what they can see, in other words, where you place them within the environment. They're slow, especially with UTM services placed on top of it, or IDP. It can be preoccupied. Again, it's the whole bait and switch. We're gonna attack you here, and then we're gonna go around the back door because all the police officers are up front trying to stop the riot up front. We're just gonna sneak in through the back and grab what we want. And again, it's usually a very quick hit. They're not looking for a whole gob of of information. They're looking for something specific, and when they find it, they take it and then they're out. That's usually when something has just gone wrong. When you go through a DDoS attack, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, your DDoS attack ends for no reason. You didn't do anything. You were trying to, you were trying to mitigate, and you're failing, and all of a sudden, everything ends without a hitch. So at that point, it's when you need to start discovering and start looking, were we compromised? And again, placement is key. If you're going to put it inside, outside, within specific segments, inside your VLANs, etc., there's a whole different myriad of ways to apply firewalls, whether they be virtual or physical. Again, you're limited by the I/O. You're limited by the segments of which it covers, and certainly you're limited by the information to which it shares between each other and other security devices. Traditional firewalls are built to be secured I/O and segments to which physically connected, but limited in blocking and enforcing rules it's capable of enforcing. IDP, intrusion detection and protection. So this correlates to IDP, IPS, IDS, all the different acronyms that get thrown out there. Basically, they all kind of do the same thing, kind of do different things too. So just by way of history here, intrusion detection and prevention is the collaboration of IDS and IDP, IPS systems. So intrusion detection service and intrusion prevention service systems are what were deemed as devices to place. If you wanted to have that level of corollary information to be able to block and make educated choices about blocking traffic, you had to employ these two systems. Now they're coming out with IDPs, which are basically the culmination of both, and collaborating and smashing them together to create this one box. Now, they are effective. They are very valuable within any organization, and I highly recommend them. However, you are limited to what you can see, again, based on where you place the box. You're also limited to by what you can see based on what you configure to go to the box. You can't IDP everything. Not there isn't a single box out there that's capable of IDPing everything in your environment. Specifically, if you have that service running on a firewall, that's a limitation. But it's both a blessing and a curse, because you can IDP traffic specific to the box in line to the traffic, or you're limited based on where you put that firewall, and your IDP goes with that. So again, we talked about what it does and where do you place it. Again, that's up to the organization. Certain organizations have trust and untrust zones or containers to which they want to have that information shared. You may have something on a DMZ. You may have something in a specific VLAN. Maybe you have a voice VLAN or a wireless VLAN that you want to make sure that you monitor that traffic because it's carrying specific data or payloads between organizations, and you want that traffic to be watched. Some people try to put it on a guest environment. I don't recommend it because you're watching the internet basically, and you don't want to watch everything that's coming from the internet. It's just going to inundate you with a bunch of unnecessary information. You want to see what's happening on your doorstep, not what's happening outside the fence. That's the best way. That's the best way I can describe about IDP placement. You want to see what's happening on your doorstep. Again, not what's happening outside your fence. You can care less. That's why the fence is there. That's what your firewall is there for. Your doorstep and your security alarm, that's what your IDP is. However, what you have turned on and what's protected is up to you. So whether you decide to protect a zone, whether you decide to protect a VLAN or specific data streams, that's what's going to be the limiting factor in all of that. It can be expensive, certainly, depending on how many boxes you have to purchase. Additional hardware is required in some cases, or if you purchase purpose-built IDPs. There's more information that needs to be learned. So already you're doing more with less. So now that less has to do more. as far as IDP, it has to learn a whole new, different set of skills, and it's not something that you pick up readily easy. And then once you get all that information, what do you do with it? You know, you're taking all these flows and you're trying to stop all that, and does it really stop what you're looking to stop? If you don't understand your traffic flow, if you don't understand what a DDoS attack looks like or a scripting attack looks like, how is it that you're supposed to configure this IDP? Now, granted, most IDPs come with pre-canned reports, pre-canned templates to help stymie these attacks. However, they also include other things in the templates that could possibly limit and stymie your environment as a whole. If you have specific rules or you have specific applications or you're using ports that are outside the norm, that can be misconstrued as an attack within an IDP system if it's not properly baselined, and then all of a sudden you're finding yourself at a loss because the very system you put in to protect you is now harming you. So I recommend putting an IDP, certainly in conjunction with a firewall, but there has to be a level of fine-tuning, there has to be a level of tuning of that environment and understanding of the security flows and how your traffic ebb and flows between each other. Otherwise, just simply shoving an IDP is not going to do a whole lot. So that moves us to the next thing, you know, about how secure is your data center. A lot of people don't want to take a look at security because it's a frightening thought. People are good with what they don't know. You know, what you don't know doesn't hurt you. However, that's not true with this because what you don't know will definitely hurt you. Is there somebody laying in the weeds waiting to attack you, just waiting for the perfect time? Maybe your organization comes out with a press release saying, we are doing this, you know, come try this, and maybe somebody has it in, or maybe someone sees opportunity in that. So the question has to be asked, but oftentimes, especially to those you know that are afraid to listen, it falls on deaf ears. So it's not uncommon to bury one's head in the sand, and I think I mentioned that earlier, and that's because it's very much true. I have sat on your side as a customer, trying to say, hey, boss, we have some security concerns. We really should address it. again, the aspect of invincibility props up, the aspect of who's going to attack us, why is someone interested in what we're going to do, and the question gets sidestepped. So Juniper ran this little survey here, and we talk about the percentages of companies who had network security breaches in the last year. There's 60%. 34% had more than one incident. The percentage of companies who were poorly positioned to quickly detect attacks, 49%. That's half. So 51% struggle to prevent the cyber attacks. 49% are not doing much to prevent the attacks. That 49%, if you flip it upside down and then you allow them to start attacking, that 51% starts growing exponentially, the order of magnitude. Percentage of IT security executives who think the most serious attacks are web-based. So you're looking at people who are looking at, my application is not going to be compromised. My service is not going to be compromised. I'm going to share this anecdote with you from when I used to work at an organization, a fairly large global organization, and I was consulting my boss and telling him we need to engage in some better security practices, especially with our user base. We need a way to correlate information, and this was about 12 years ago. We were at the cusp of bleeding edge technology where we had a range of services and data centers around the world, but we were running AS400s. We were running big mainframe services. So my boss turned to me and said, who is going to attack us? We have a mainframe. They only attack Windows. It was there that he sidestepped and side-skirted, and he said, we don't want to invest in that kind of money because we have no reason to. A few months later, we were attacked, and we were part of one of the biggest attacks the world has ever seen with NIMDA, Code Red 32, etc. And our network came to a grinding halt. All of our PCs became infected, and it started to proliferate through the entire environment. We're talking close to over 4,000 PCs that decided that they were going to talk to each other and kill our connection. Our frame relay links went down. Our MPLS links went down. Our VPNs were not functional. We had to shut circuits and LANs down individually just to contain traffic. Again, that is saying I am prepared because I have this set of services that no one else cares about. Nothing can be further from the truth other than to say, eventually it's going to happen to you. Eventually you're going to have somebody knocking on your door and willing to try to take some information. Again, this we found out happened just because somebody happened to get the virus on their PC, VPN'd in, and then it just torpedoed everything. It just grew that fast. It created basically our own denial of service attack because all of a sudden that version of internal attacking, well, that's sort of what happened there, except it wasn't deliberate. It was just a byproduct of what that virus was trying to do. So I ask you, within the security community, or if you're going to your managers, that you at least have the discussion, at least broach the subject on, are we doing everything we can to secure our environments? Are we doing everything that's feasibly responsible? We as employees have some fiduciary responsibility in ensuring that the organization remains profitable and that we don't spend crazy amounts of money on stuff that doesn't seem to do anything. However, we also have a responsibility to keep the lights on and make sure that we do keep our jobs, and by doing that, self-preservation should come into mode and asking that one question, am I doing enough to secure the data center? So that brings us to the cloud. What are we doing about the cloud? Again, the cloud is the buzzword. Very much indicates that all services rendered to some data center out connected to the internet. Again, the openness of the internet provides you that ability to, for freedom, flexibility, always on demand. So services like Google Docs, MobileMe, Salesforce.com, Force.com, Azure, Amazon, Sun, They all engage in some form or level of cloud computing, and they all provide certain levels of service, whether it be service, software as a service, platforms as a service, uh, it's applications as a service. It really, really is an amazing feat where we've taken the mainframes and we put them out into the open world. So basically, we've kind of reverse engineered everything, and now we say, okay, everybody's going to go access, through these public circuits, through these public means, and access it from the internet. It's a wonderful concept. It provides businesses with a whole lot of flexibility and revenue and profit margins. However, security is a very big piece of the pie, and it should be. Again, when you look at challenges for the cloud in and of itself, when you're first thinking about it, you're talking about data location and privacy, internet dependency, performance, and latency. So are you able to access that service? Do you have a direct feed, or are you accessing it through public means? Availability and service levels, this is very huge, because this is what dictates, and this is what has to mirror your own security platform. Your own security service level has to mirror, or they have to mirror yours. If they don't, then there's going to be a mismatch, and there's going to be a misalignment of priorities. And then it's not always easy to migrate current enterprise applications. Many people are interested in the cloud. They're not completely understanding of what or how to get into the cloud, and they engage in cloud-based services, with, again, the Googles and the Microsofts of the world. But they think they're ready to go and take that, next giant step for business kind. The unfortunate thing is that they're not thinking of all the applications that they have, so they have to make modifications to these applications. So what do? You have to go and you start creating custom applications to tie into that application, because your application isn't cloud ready. Developing use cases, developing understanding of what your need for the cloud should be as paramount as we need to go to the cloud. If you're asking yourself that question, I want to go to the cloud, then you need to be asking yourself, do I have enough to take up there? Do I have the developers to support it? Or if not, is the organization I'm going to share my data with, are they going to comply with my security requirements? And if any of those answers are no, then I would reconsider you just standing put until something better comes along. So security questions for the cloud. Who has the right to access your data? Very big question. Is it just you? Is it them, the developers? Who? Are backups encrypted? Where is that backup being stored? Are you keeping it on site? Do you have a SAN? Do they have a SAN? If so, how is that data transmitted and encrypted? How are the users authenticated? And has the service provider been tested by a reputable third party? Again, if somebody tells you, I'm secure, and then you ask them, hey, well, how do you know you're secure? Well, I tested it myself. Would you trust that individual? Obviously not. No one's going to do that. Just like, somebody built a house, and they're like, oh, I built this house with my bare hands. And you're like, well, has it been inspected? No, I inspected it myself. I'm fairly sure it's good. Would you buy that house? I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be no. It's the same thing. You're putting your business lives on the line by putting it out there, putting it on the cloud, and then we're haphazardly going out there and acting like everything is secure intrinsically, because it's built. How can any one of those organizations not be, right? The reality there is that there are individuals there, for good or bad, don't always follow protocol. And that goes with any organization on this planet. Despite all best intentions, shortcuts sometimes are taken, regardless of what's put in place. So the more you can do to mitigate those issues, the more that you can put in and to secure and ensure that you're going to be made whole in case of a breach, that is very important. And then how effectively is your data segregated from others? If you're sharing a big cloud platform, how many other people are on that platform? And again, who has right to access your data? And is your data encrypted with good algorithm, and who's holding the keys? Do you have the keys? Do you have the pre-shared keys? Are they the same pre-shared keys that are being extended to everybody else? Are they unique? I'm pretty sure with the major organizations, they're all unique. They all use the appropriate algorithms to secure your environments. It's just a question of does the individual go home with those keys? Taking to the guy who takes his backups and shoves it in the back of his car. While a very decent idea back in the day, how many of you know somebody that has actually taken that only to have it stolen or destroyed because somebody took the car or somebody broke into their vehicle? Same concept. So this brings us to the component of what do we do, how do we do it, and how do we secure this environment with all of these different aspects. So we talked about DDoS. We talked about how prevalent it is today. What it encompassed yesterday, its evolution today, and what we're going to see from it tomorrow. We talked about web application security and how they're tied at the hip, whereas DDoS is the glove, and the web application security is the hand to take the diamond. Those are the things that we've talked about, and hopefully we have an understanding. And that brings us to Junos DDoS Secure and Junos Web Application Secure. Junos DDoS Secure. So what is it? It is basically software. It's unique and innovative technology that monitors and logs all inbound and outbound traffic. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how's that any different from an IDP or from a firewall? Well, they don't maintain algorithms, and they don't maintain states to which it adheres algorithms to the traffic, specific traffic. So it uses a charm algorithm for which it learns the IP addresses that can be trusted and then intelligently responds in real time. So basically, it's like a bouncer in the front tagging you, placing that little stamp on your hand, and as you go in and out, they use that little fluorescent light and they're scanning you. Always effective? Not 100%, but you know what? It's better than the guy coming back and say, "Oh, I already paid." No, you're not 21, or etc. It definitely applies basically a stamp on that traffic, thus validating it against its engine to make sure that it's not some type of malicious activity. So it's looking at the synapse packets. It's looking at the information coming from, if it's coming from a specific IP address, if it's coming from multiple IP addresses, if it's directed to a single user or a group of users, it knows and it has the intelligence to decipher that, and then basically, again, we're stamping that traffic as it passes, and if it sees it more than one time, it then starts asking questions of that traffic. If that traffic isn't able to come up with a viable answer in its algorithm, then it gets shut down. And it does have a very good percentage of catching and very, 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 very few false positives. Again, security is mired in the fact that sometimes not everything is what it seems, and sometimes it seems to slow progress. But if you don't do anything, then we are pretty much limiting ourselves to what we're going to be able to do as a business. So it drops the suspect and non-compliant packets as soon as the optimum performance from critical resources start to degrade. So it's looking at that as well. So it's looking at the ability for your traffic your resources to handle that traffic. If it starts noticing that there's something going on, it actually does something about it. So the heuristic and granular approach to the DDoS mitigation guarantees availability for legitimate users. So basically, it's looking at the bad traffic. It's specifically targeting that bad traffic. Again, it's stamping it. It's making sure that it identifies it, and that if it's trying to come back around, again, dressed as a circus clown or whatever, what have you, that it actually is going to, block what it needs to block and not the valid traffic. It's dynamic and self-learning. It's effective against latest application layer and stealth attack vectors. Again, being able to shroud itself in a cloak of mystery, being able to hide its packet, or trying to bury itself within a header and try to encapsulate itself that way. It's also ultra low latency, fully IPv6 compliant. So for those of you that are running IPv6, rest assured that this product does work on those systems. It's a plug and play, so it's basically a server. It is a box that I put in. You configure some IP addresses, you configure some information, and away you go. There is some planning that has to happen. There is some information that needs to be provided, but once you have all that groundwork laid out, It's not a matter of taking 10 days to put this thing in. It's just a matter of finding the time to place this device in line. Fail-safe and high availability options. It's fully automated for fast response. That's the key right there. Fully automated. So we talk about security again. So we have filters, we have IDPs that are able to monitor stuff, but you don't always have the time to tune. You don't always have the time to look at the data streams and say, I'm trying to understand where it's going, how it's going. Firewalls are only going to tell you, I'm taking an influx of data and I'm blocking what I can. But it's not going to necessarily tell you, especially when it's really busy, what it's doing. Same thing with an IDP. IDP is going to tell you, hey, I see an attack, I'm trying to block it, but I don't necessarily know what you want me to do with it, because I don't know if it's really good or bad or et cetera. I'm basing this on my signature base, but not entirely, it's not entirely 100% accurate. And I don't know how fast to react. So fully automated means that you don't have to worry about running to the box, logging in, and saying, oh my God, what is going on, and then trying to shut down ports and trying to shut down. This will start responding in kind and start dropping those packets immediately. So now once we've headed off at the pass, now we want to secure our applications and make sure that if something were to get through, if something by some means or some way somebody wasn't able to embed, either through social engineering or through backdoor somewhere into the web applications, that you have the level of security in order to identify and block that nefarious activity, but at the same time also create an environment to which they think they can attack you. And then you tag them. So this brings us to the first web intrusion deception system. And by web intrusion deception, it means that you're actually placing something out there so that they can look at it and attack it and basically tag themselves. It's very much like a honeypot. Basically, you're placing this out there, you're putting these files out there so that they can get access to it, and it helps mitigate the application attack because now you've profiled this individual. We're blocking the attackers, the individuals. We're not blocking IP space. We're preventing and we're deceiving them. So we're leading them off on a wild goose chase. Here, come get this pot of gold, at the end of my rainbow. Whereas the real stuff is protected, because we're actually putting something out there. We're putting a tar file out there that's actually pretty much begging them to come there. And then we tag them. We're looking at auto abuse detection processors, abuse recording, abusive behavior analysis, abuse response, and global attacker database. So we take this information. So if you look from the client to the firewall to a load balancer, it takes the traffic and offloads it off to the Junos Web App Secure. So that sits basically offline, off to the side. It takes that data and then it looks at it, and then it notices that somebody's coming in and trying to do something, or it puts this little cookie out there, if you will, this little nugget for them to attack. It immediately grabs that information and it starts identifying the user. It starts fingerprinting them, and it fingerprints them by being able to identify one of 100 unique attributes that a specific bot device appliance might have. So if he's attacking you from an iPad, or if he's coming at you from a Windows server or a Unix box, everybody's saying, well, what if it's a bot? Well, still has, the bot still has to reside on a machine somewhere, and if that machine, just because it's not coming from an individual doesn't mean you don't want to stop that either. So you want to profile it and then being able to identify it and then send the pertinent information downstream to the firewalls to make an intelligent decision on how to block it, and then using your IDP and telling your IDP what to look for. That's automated. That's being able to react on the fly and then take proactive measures by identifying these guys up front and then sharing that information in the background with other people, being able to make decisions and then being able to provide you with their information and saying, hey, I saw this guy all the way. Think of it as a seamed appliance for the sky. It correlates that information. It identifies the hacker. It identifies the machine. It based on myriad different ways and unique attributes for that machine. So it's not just looking at a MAC address. It's not just looking at an IP address. It is correlating hundreds of different items out there on that specific box and rendering it a unique item out there. And once it does that, it applies a alias to it, a unique alias by which it'll forever be known. And then we share that information with Juno Spotlight Secure. So we take a look at this little diagram here in conjunction with SRX gateways. Now bear in mind, you don't have to have Juniper firewalls in order to make this thing work. Actually, if you have the Junos Web Secure or the Junos DDoS Secure, you can still use the Junos Spotlight Secure. The only difference is that in order to affect change, you would have to have SRX firewalls in order to make that reactive change. Otherwise, the Web App Secure, the DDoS Secure can operate on its own and continue to function the way I mentioned earlier, automatically with quick and efficient responses. It's just an augmentation. It leverages the ability to identify that information. It shares it with people globally. So a device gets fingerprinted, entered in the secure database. Attack is detected somewhere in Europe. It gets shared. The fingerprint is available for all Junos Web App Secure deployments within your environment, but then it gets shared in the database, and then the ability for other individuals to share that information as well gets brought down to their devices, and they get informed. So basically, it's dynamic healing, dynamic protection on the fly. So a device gets fingerprinted and detected, then the attacker goes to any website protected by Junos Web Secure. So device level tracking, it's huge. Hundreds of unique identifiers, device fingerprinting, real-time global sharing intelligence of hackers, assignment of permanent aliases of hackers, and the ability to direct counter responses at a single device. Yes, you heard that right. You're able to attack the device if you wanted to. If you were mad enough that you felt that you had to attack it, you could reverse attack the device without them even knowing what they were attacking. So pretty much, it's firing a salvo from way over the sea. They will have no idea where it came from likewise. It's just the ability to be able to defend yourself and be able to prevent any issues arising from a reverse attack. Again, very high level, Junos Web App Secure, Junos DDoS Secure, Junos Spotlight Secure. They address DDoS attacks in real time. They address application security in real time and prevent application security breaches in real time, identifying critical applications, critical aspects and unique identifiers to help prevent environments from being compromised, and at the same time maintaining your doing more with less mantra. So if that, typically, you have to invest in many different services, many different people to leverage this type of services. These are collaborative, they're shared environments, and combine that with Juniper's SRX series gateways, you will have one holistic environment that you can use to combat these security breaches that are occurring day in and day out. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found this informative. Please connect with us at www.juniper.net or at structure-tech.com. My name is David Antilles. Again, I'm Director of Network Architecture, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
If anyone has any questions, you can type them into the questions panel. We'll just wait a minute here to see, to follow up, see if anyone has any questions. All right, thank you all for attending. If you have any further questions, please feel free to shoot an email. We'll be sending out the link for the presentation shortly. Thank you so much.